We recently did a video about things iPhone users get wrong about Android, so it feels only fitting that we do the other side of this coin. Things Android users get wrong about the iPhone. So strap in, these are going to be some flaming hot takes and some other that I think are much more lukewarm, but people tend to disagree with. I'll be hanging out in the comments for some pleasant conversation. Let's start with some classics. There's no back button on iOS. There's no number row on the first layer of the keyboard, no matter if you install Gboard or any custom third-party keyboard. And you can't run split-screen applications on your iPhone. You just can't. And that's fine. Now hold on. Some of these are more fine than others, but let's go one by one. The lack of a back button, I truly believe, is only a complaint from people that have only used Android devices, because you can prefer to have a back button, and that's fine. It's not really a deal breaker or a problem for iPhone users. Like, it's up to the app developers to implement how you go back on how you navigate an app. But because Apple is so stingy with how you have to follow their guidelines or you can't exist on the App Store, the experience is very much consistent and it's not really a problem in day-to-day operations. Then there's a whole number row situation where in certain Arabic-speaking countries and languages, you use the number row very often to input and replace certain letters with numbers because of how they sound. And that really should be easier for people on iPhones, and it really should just be an option. However, little Android users know that you can just fast input numbers on iOS by swiping from the corner of the screen into the specific number area, and it will just fast input a number and go back to the previous layer. It shouldn't be a gesture and a hidden thing, but it is. But it's not a big deal. And then there's the split screen situation. Now, I know this is a controversial take, but I'm gonna say it anyway, so feel free to kill me. Split screen is a hack on small screen devices. Like, I'm not talking foldables, I'm not talking tablets. On those, you can clearly see a use case for them. If you have a Google Pixel Fold, for example, you know, you split the screen in half, you're gonna have two smartphone-sized apps running side by side, and that's fantastic. But on a regular 18:9, 21:9, this is too cramped to split in half. When you do, you get half the apps and they're collapsed and menus go all wonky, and it's just not a good experience. Apple's solution to this is to implement what I feel like is a better picture-in-picture experience than you get on Android. Now, picture-in-picture doesn't work for all scenarios, like if you want to take notes whilst you watch something on a browser window, for example, it doesn't really work for that. But for my type of multitasking, which might involve picture-in-picture a video or having a timer, the way the multitasking works on iOS with the dynamic island and some widgets up there, or the picture-in-picture windows, is an okay experience and definitely not a limiting thing for the way I use my phone. Magsafe is a big deal. Call it Magsafe, call it Qi 2. Magnets on the back of your phone for accessories is a big deal, and I cannot believe in 2024 Pixels don't have Magsafe built in, or Qi 2. Samsung doesn't have Qi 2 anything, and for certain devices it will definitely be harder. Like, I know you can get cases and cases with magnets, but if you have an S Pen and you have, you know, a case with magnets, this will behave all wonky. You can just Google Magsafe case plus S Pen and it will be weird. On Pixel devices, this should be an obvious implementation, but for some reason it isn't. And if you don't see the problem, it's probably because you've never had access to the magnets to begin with. Most people that I know that have used an iPhone for an extended period of time have an assortment of Magsafe devices, whether that being wallets, car mounts, chargers. It doesn't really matter, it's just very convenient and it should be on every device, period. Which brings us neatly to the accessories category. Android is where you go to find hardware variety, but because there's so much variety and manufacturers launch dozens of devices every year, it's quite common that the accessory selection and some of the quality of these accessories can be lackluster, particularly if you're buying a non-flagship device. But this goes slightly deeper than that. Like, of course, you're gonna find cases and screen protectors and all the basic stuff, but when it comes to like a third-party camera mount, for example, or if you have a drone and you use a drone app, or some studio lights and the studio light app, the software also suffers from all of this variety. Like, the experience can be breaking. It can literally break. That was the main reason why back in 2018 I considered trying an iPhone for the very first time. My Pixel was struggling with my DJI drone app. I had some studio lights that would randomly turn off mid-recording because of how the Bluetooth sort of disconnected, reconnected. And all of these variations are much less common on the iPhone. And that's just because of the lack of choice, which, can be a double-edged sword, but it definitely has some positives for day-to-day operations. And since we're talking software, people think you cannot install apps outside the App Store on the iPhone, and that's simply not true. And I'm not just talking about the recent changes that EU made to the whole App Store monopoly. I'm talking about actually side-loading apps from GitHub onto your phone. Just, Google the Alt Store or Google Sideloadly, and you will find some options that is definitely possible. Like, if the only reason you can't consider an iPhone is because there's a particular, let's say, Reddit app that's no longer available, or if there's a particular YouTube client that you would like to try out, if you use Google, you'll find some stuff, and it's definitely possible. So sideloading is not really even dependent on jailbreaking your phone or any sort of hardcore modification. It's only a couple of steps more difficult than going on APK Mirror and downloading an APK file. And to close this video off, let's talk about app exclusivity. Like, this was something that has always bothered me to a point. Like, apps being released first on iOS always felt like an unfair thing, but I reached out to a couple of iOS-only developers and just point-blank asked them, why is this a thing? And their answers were just really, really good and really hard to argue against. Like, for starters, if Apple adds a new feature into iOS, when all their phones are updated in September, overnight more than 50% of the devices on the market are going to support these new features. And the way developers make apps can be months in advance. So if they see a new feature, they get excited about the opportunity to implement that feature into their app or just create an entire app around this feature. You can't really do the same thing on Android with how staggered updates are released. So you have to wait for the feature to be available in most devices so that when you launch the app, you get a big swoop of downloads and the app gets some positive momentum. The other thing that I heard that was really common was if a developer, for example, has a preference for iOS, it's very hard to launch the same app with the same quality. Imagine they make something unique that's really good and really native to the OS. You can't really make a native iOS app into a native Android app just overnight, just because you wanted to. You either have to make a worse Android app, which is just not a good decision, or you have to hire someone to make your app better for Android, or you have to learn how to make apps for Android, which oftentimes involves just rebuilding the app from the ground up and doing that thing again, which then you have to maintain two versions of the same app at the same time. And most of these unique apps that are launched on iOS often comes from solo developers. And if you're a solo developer, it can be cost prohibitive to hire someone to port the app for Android. It can be time prohibitive if you have to redevelop the app for Android. And launching the app that you love and built for a platform that you don't know and made it worse is a bad proposition all around. And so it makes perfect sense that they're exclusive to iOS. That and the fact that, users of iOS are more likely to spend money on the App Store, so they just make more money there, which definitely pays the bills. So that's why they do it. And there are other reasons why iPhone users prefer the iPhone and Android users prefer Android. These are just some of the things that I thought about in the past and that I've talked with my friends in the past. So yeah, let me know if you want to see a part 2 to these videos, or if you disagree with everything that I said in the comments below. I look forward to hanging out with you. Okay, thank you so very much for watching. This was a fun one, and yeah, I'll see you very soon. Bye.